I paid for Disney Adventure with my own money. No invite, no sponsorship. Here's what it really looks like as a normal passenger. In April 2026, I finally boarded Disney Adventure in Singapore. I booked an Oceanview Stateroom with Verandah, a room that would normally cost around US $1,200 per person for a 4-night cruise. I was fortunate to receive a 50% discount after Disney postponed the original voyage dates due to delays in the ship launch. Even with the discount, this was still money out of my own pocket. So, this isn't a sponsored review. This is what Disney Adventure is really like for a normal paying passenger. I've been genuinely excited about Disney Adventure for a long time. For me, it felt like Disneyland has finally arrived in Singapore. As a Disney fan, that's a pretty special thought, being able to experience Disney magic much closer to home. But before boarding, I have to be honest, I was also a little worried. You see, I had been following discussions on the unofficial Disney Adventure Facebook community, and there were quite a number of disappointing early impressions being shared. Complaints about crowds, operations, and whether the experience felt worth the price. So, naturally, my expectations became lower. I prepared myself not to expect too much. But at the same time, I also believed in Disney. I visited Tokyo Disneyland and Tokyo DisneySea more times than I can count, almost every year, sometimes even 2 or 3 times in a year. And the reason I always go back is simple. Disney has a kind of magic that's very hard to explain, but once you felt it, you just want to experience it again. So, despite the doubts, I boarded Disney Adventure, hoping to find that magic at sea. Our Disney Adventure journey begins at Marina Bay Cruise Center, where we arrive at around 2:30 in the afternoon. One thing that stood out immediately, many guests were arriving with large suitcases, probably packing for a full holiday experience. For us, we packed relatively light. Most of our belongings could be carried on board ourselves, so we skipped the luggage drop-off process and headed straight for security screening. Right before customs, there was also a photo booth section with a theme backdrop for embarkation photos. Naturally, we gave that a pass. It felt a little like those souvenir photo spots you see at tourist attractions. Fun for some, but not really our kind of thing. And with that, we were officially on our way aboard Disney Adventure. And that's when the excitement really starts to build. I'll be honest, my first impression of Disney Adventure was a little underwhelming. From watching many other videos online, I have imagined that stepping into the main lobby would feel like a big Disney moment. Warm welcomes, maybe characters around, and that unmistakable sense of magic right from the start. But that wasn't what we experienced. Instead, it felt like a busy hotel lobby. Guests moving quickly in every direction, people trying to find their bearings, and overall, quite a lot of movement and noise. To be fair, we boarded later in the day, and we understood that many guests has already arrived in the morning. So perhaps we simply missed some of that opening excitement. But at the same time, I did feel a little disappointed. We wasn't late, we chose this timing intentionally. And as paying guests, I felt that every boarding welcome should somehow feel something special. After boarding, we also had to locate our stateroom and make our way there on our own. And in that moment, I couldn't help but think of my stays at Tokyo Disneyland Hotel, where cast members personally escort guests to their rooms, making even the check-in journey feels magical. That little touch was something I miss here. At that point, I was quietly wondering, was this really going to feel like Disney?
paint with all the colors of the wind? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Yay!
I got goosebumps. I actually knocked for the song, and these ladies actually sang the song very well.
Thankfully, the moment we stepped into our cabin, my feelings immediately changed. This was beautiful. We booked an Oceanview Stateroom with Verandah, and my first impression was just how spacious it felt. Bright, comfortable, thoughtfully designed, and unmistakably Disney. What really caught my attention was the theme, The Lion King. I'm sorry about that, I really had to. There was absolutely no way I was not going to do that. Another thing I really appreciated was the location. We specifically chose a cabin on deck 10, and in hindsight, that turned out to be one of the best decisions of the trip. Just outside on the same floor were the casual dining spots and beverages stations. That meant whenever things got crowded, which they often did, I could simply grab the food or drinks and bring them back to enjoy in the room. Honestly, having that convenience made the cruise feel much more comfortable. For the first time since boarding, I finally started feeling this is the Disney experience I came for. Despite my underwhelming first impression of boarding, I told myself, food is where Disney usually shines. And as a typical Singaporean who enjoys all kinds of food, I was ready. So here's the honest review of dining on Disney Adventure. I started with breakfast at the buffet. It's a very typical hotel-style buffet setup. You got cereals, some Asian options like prata, and Western staples like sausages, toast, and eggs. Honestly, nothing much to shout about. You can either walk in or make a reservation, which helps manage the crowd. And I give the benefit of the doubt here because it was quite busy. But this is actually where I got slightly irritated. I asked for a cup of coffee twice and it still didn't arrive. Only on the third request did it finally come, about 3 minutes later. Now for the casual dining areas, they are a different story. These are more like fast food style counters, but the quality actually surprised me. I highly recommend the burgers at Stitch Ohana Grill. In fact, I think I ordered about 3 different burgers from here throughout the cruise. The kebabs at Cosmic Kebabs were also really good. Simple but flavorful. And the best part, these are available throughout the whole day and included in your cruise fare. No additional cost. Dinner is where the experience changes completely. It's a reserved dining system and you are assigned a different restaurant each night. If you're on a 4-night cruise, the first and fourth night are usually in the same restaurant but with different menus. And you also get the same waiter throughout the cruise. They are actually the one receiving the gratitudes included in your cruise fare. Although additional tipping is always appreciated if you felt like they did a great job. And I have to say, service at dinner was excellent. They remembered our drinking preferences and were consistently attentive. But the food itself was very mixed. One thing I can say clearly is this: Asian cuisine was disappointing. I probably had one of the worst versions of Singapore-style chicken rice I have ever tasted. The chicken was overcooked and dry, and the Japanese ramen, the egg was hard-boiled instead of being soft and runny, and the broth was quite bland. But on the other hand, Western dishes were excellent. The fish fillets and beef steaks were genuinely impressive, tender, flavorful, and well executed. And desserts were a highlight. You could tell the chocolate and ice cream were made with good quality ingredients. Rich, smooth, and satisfying. So overall, food on Disney Adventure is a mixed bag. Breakfast is average, casual dining is surprisingly good and convenient, dinner service is excellent, but food quality varies quite a bit depending on what you order. And as someone who came in with high expectations, this was probably the area with the biggest surprises, both good and bad. This is what media previews don't show. From my observation throughout the cruise, one thing became quite clear. The pools are usually packed throughout the day. There isn't really a quiet time for them unless you go very early in the morning or much later in the evening. Queue and waiting times really depend on what you're trying to do. A good example is the Disney store. On the first night, when the ship enters international water, the store opens for only a short window, about 1 to 2 hours. And during this time, there is an extremely long queue to get in. To be honest, I would say it's not really worth spending your time queuing on that first night. Because on the rest of the cruise day, it's usually much quieter with almost no queue at all. For shows, timing is actually quite forgiving. If you arrive an hour before the performance, you can still get a very good seat, whether it's at the Imagination Garden or the Walt Disney Theatre. Character meet and greets are also not too difficult to secure. I personally managed to book sessions with Mickey, Minnie, and Baymax without too much trouble. So overall, I won't describe it as chaotic, but rather it's a ship where experience really dependent on timing and planning. Despite everything, the crowds, the queues, the mixed food experience, the absolute highlight of the entire cruise was the theatre shows. If you're a huge fan of Disney or Marvel lore, this is where Disney Adventure really shines. The storylines are completely original. But what impressed me was how they integrated characters from across the Disney and Marvel universe. It never felt like a random mashed up. Instead, everything felt very intentionally written, like each character had a purpose in the story. In fact, I would have happily watched the show a second time. But interestingly, the system is designed so that each guest can only book each show once, which actually makes sense. It ensures that everyone on board get a fair chance to experience it. Now, compared to places like Tokyo Disneyland, characters are not really that easy to encounter here. You won't just randomly bump into them anywhere. But they do appear, just in more unexpected moments. For example, I once met Pluto on an open deck area where there were very few people around. And because it was less crowded, it actually turned into a really nice relaxed photo opportunity. The main area where characters tend to appear more frequently is around the Royal Court. That's where you likely have your best chances for meet and greets or spontaneous appearances. So, while characters' interaction isn't as constant as in theme parks, when it does happen here, it feels a little more special, but it's less predictable. And I think that's really the essence of Disney Adventure. It's not about constant access to magic, it's about catching it when it appears. So, the quick answer is yes, I would recommend Disney Adventure. In fact, within 2 weeks of coming back, there was already a part of me thinking, I may actually want to do this again, maybe even make it an annual trip. But at the same time, it's not a perfect cruise, and I don't think it should be seen as one. I often compare it to my experiences at Tokyo Disneyland and Tokyo Disney Sea. And I would say the overall experience here is just a little slight notch below that level of polish and consistency. But I also understand, for Singapore, this might be about as good as it gets for my Disney experience of this scale. And to be fair, I went on board only about 2 months after it was launched. So it's very possible there are still operational hiccups being worked out here. I've also heard a lot about other Disney cruises having theme nights, such as a pirate night. So for me, there's still curiosity to come back again in the future, especially if new programs or seasonal events are being introduced. As for the food, It really depends on what you order. Not everything is bad, and not everything is amazing either. It sits somewhere in the middle. Very inconsistent, but with clear highlights if you choose well. But if there's one absolute must-do on this cruise, it is the shows. The theatre performances alone are worth planning your entire cruise around. So overall, Disney Adventure isn't perfect, but it does something very important. It brings Disney storytelling to sea in a way that is still meaningful, especially here in Singapore. And for me, that alone makes it worth experiencing, at least once, or maybe more than once.